Today at work, my colleagues and I started talking about Daniel Andrews Sucks. And I realized that even though it's been removed from the internet, it's important to still talk about. I've come home from work. It's just past midnight my time, just past midnight 30. But I really want to talk about this. I've made some notes. It's not really scripted. It's just something I want to talk about. So, about 10 days ago, I voted in the state election for Victoria, for my state in Australia. Victoria's political system is a lot like other states in Australia. We have two houses, the Victorian Legislative Assembly, which is the upper house. No, Victorian Legislative Council, which is the upper house, and the Victorian Legislative Assembly, which is the lower house. Executive power in the state rests with a person called the Premier, who is the leader of the party who holds the majority of seats in the lower house. And while Victoria does have a number of independents and small parties, essentially we have two parties. We've got the morally and economically conservative Liberal Party, and we have the anti-level train crossing Labor Party. So my options for Premier of Victoria come down to two people, and I'd like to introduce them to you. The first is a man by the name of Matthew Guy, who is the leader of the Liberal Party, and we see him pictured here as Homer Simpson eating a lobster. And our other option is this person here, Daniel Andrews, the leader of the Labor Party, who's pictured here as Drake. And it's this particular mimetic approach to politics that ended up landing in my wheelhouse of analog games about 4 days before the election. And that's where we get to start talking about Daniel Andrews Sucks. So the Victorian Liberal Party released a website about the Labor Party called danielandrews.sucks. It's this really simply formatted website that has now disappeared, and I cannot find any images of it anywhere on the internet, which is such a shame. It had YouTube videos, which still exist on the Liberal Party's YouTube page. It had some outward-facing political, policy nonsense. And then there was a bit that was really weird that, you clicked on an MP's name, a Labor MP's name, and it took you to a deceptive website that made it look like their entire online presence had been shut down because of, police investigations into corruption. It was crazy. But right in the middle of it, there was this thing called Daniel Andrews Sucks. And Daniel Andrews Sucks is a card game. And it's a very bad card game, but it's still a card game. Here it is here. It is Australia's newest and most exciting card game. It has almost no redeeming features from a mechanical perspective, and it's certainly unlikely that it made an impact on the election because, spoiler alert, Daniel Andrews wins in a landslide, or as some people are calling it, a Dan slide. So I need to explain what this game's about before I talk about why I need to talk about it. It is a lot of complex rules that, like the rest of the website, I can no longer find online and didn't think ahead enough to actually make a copy of it myself. But I can tell you what it was about because I remember them. I remember them so clearly. So at the beginning, the stated goal of Daniel Andrews Sucks is that it's a card game which brings together, and I'll quote here, the humor of the Andrews leadership, the difficulty of understanding his ongoing failures, and the challenge of piecing together a solution. It will apparently deliver this better understanding of the Labor government's flaws and how we as the people can fix those flaws and get the state back on track. Just for reference, my political views aren't coming into this part. This is a discussion of Daniel Andrews Sucks on its own terms. So this aim is really clear, and it's one that I can certainly get behind. We tend to, as residents of a state, we tend to suffer the barbs of political corruption or incompetence without actually having the tools to reach out and fix that ourselves. We tend to... So in terms of how we can explore political corruption, we've got new media, snappy YouTube videos and snap cuts and stuff like that. We've got a really, really short news cycle, and we've got like the issues that we're talking about are not easy to comprehend on their own. We're talking about millions or billions of dollars, or we're talking about, thousands of people's livelihoods or lives. It's not easy for me as a member of the state to really understand what I'm looking at. And so having a game that is designed to help me to explore that is admirable, right? But exploring it in like a credible and healthy way is not what Daniel Andrews Sucks is trying to do. Okay, so here are our rules. Our rules are: we take a deck of playing cards, we split it into two piles. In one pile, we put hearts, and in the other pile, we put all the other cards. Then we deal out 5 cards from the other deck to every player, and then each player selects a card from their hand of 5, that they think represents the worst display of corruption or incompetence that the Andrews government has performed. And they read it aloud to the group, and then they place it in front of them. And here we kind of hit our first roadblock. It's really unclear in this game where we're meant to be getting these ideas from. Whether this is built for like a deck of cards to be printed with like the things on them, like the 3 of clubs is the Pakenham Skyrail or something like that, or whether we're meant to be making them up. There's a guide that says like spades is Liberal Party failures, clubs is their like incompetence or whatever, and then diamonds are their scandals and corruption. But it doesn't tell me which lie or scandal or failure is covered by the card that I'm holding. So I have to imagine that players are playing this from their own memory of the political landscape. Which, okay, I want to talk about how that falls apart later. But first, we generate our examples, we read them aloud, we put them in front of each other, and then we all vote. We all vote on which one we think individually has done the most damage to Victoria. If you play the Labour's red shirt rort scandal, and I play the East-West link incompetence, then the group votes, and whoever gets the most votes for the most detrimental incompetence wins that round. And then they get a card from the hearts pile, which they then read aloud, which is one of Matthew Guy's policies, one of Lobsterman's policies, to get Victoria back on track, or get back in control is his like slogan, right? Which kind of falls apart again because there's nothing telling me which policy is represented by which card, or if there's like a deck and we have to like, the 2 of hearts is like the religious education in schools policy that he has, or something like that. And anyway, the first person to 3 Liberal policies is the winner. And I wish I was making this part up. They're the winner if they immediately throw their hands in the air and with a, like stroke of brilliance, yell, Daniel Andrews sucks. Oh, it's insufferable. It's an insufferable game for insufferable people. Okay, so that's the game. That's the game that I want to talk about. That's the game that I need to talk about. Because any analysis, any discussion of Daniel Andrews Sucks as a game has to begin first and foremost with the idea that it's propaganda, that it is designed wholly to influence. Now, there's this really weird thing where like any art designed to sway opinion can be counted as propaganda. And like any art with a message could be counted as propaganda. But there are these 3 elements that are like really important to define Daniel Andrews Sucks as propaganda. First off, it was produced 4 days before an election. It covers wholly the issues of that election. It's built with the aim of making you vote a certain way. Secondly, it's funded by the political party that seeks support. This is not an artist making art. This is the product of a political machine. And finally, this isn't intended for actual play. There are too many barriers, whether it's the fact that the rules are written very poorly and slips into and out of passive voice, doesn't have the right tensing halfway through. It's got a weird player count, which is 1 minus the population of Victoria. Like everyone except for Daniel Andrews plays this game. It's not, and maybe it needs these cards that don't exist yet, at least to my knowledge. So it's not built to be played. It's built to be read. It's built to be text rather than engagement. And engagement's kind of the next thing, kind of the next problem. So we define it as propaganda. Propaganda's point is to engage you. Audience action creates an experience, an emotional experience called complicity. Complicity is where players feel responsible for their own negative impacts. In a regular game, this is designed to make the rules seem fair, like players had a hand in their own destruction. This is why when I play Dark Souls, I always feel like if I die, it's my fault. That's my complicity, right? It's not this stupid game cheated me. It's not, oh, that's how the dice fell. It's I made choices. Those choices had impacts, and I suffer the barbs of those impacts. So that's in a regular game. In propaganda, it's actually got a second element to it, which is that it is designed to make players feel personally slighted by whatever it is the game is trying to sell you on. It invests you so that you convince yourself that the message the game is presenting is accurate. There's this really distinct difference between viewing propaganda or reading propaganda, between watching a movie and even if we're cheering at the screen and we're really like emotionally engaged, there's this really big difference between seeing it and experiencing it. Okay, so experiencing propaganda. So we're going to talk about a 2009 game, I believe, called Train. Train is a game by Brenda Romero. There's a link to a VentureBeat article in the description and also a link to Brenda's website with Train. I'm just going to bring up some pictures and stuff of Train first as I sort of discuss what it's about. And I do not want to do it in service, so we're going to have a bit of a chat. I'm going to read some texts I do. So in this 2013 article for VentureBeat, Dean Takahashi wrote about this board game called Train. Train is this beautifully constructed game. It's absolutely gorgeous. And it is designed to engage that sense of complicity. I can't zoom in on this. Okay. It's designed to engage that sense of complicity. In it, players follow instructions to load these small yellow pegs that represent people onto a train and move them to the other side, to the terminus region here. The better players load the trains more efficiently. You follow the instructions and you interpret and execute those instructions in such a way that you load more people onto the trains. So the game challenges you, how good are you at executing on these instructions? The other shoe drops when there's a card that reveals what the terminus is. The trains are going to Auschwitz. You are Nazis loading Jews onto trains to go to concentration camps. And that's how the game sells you. That's how the game explains its message to you. It doesn't tell you that it is easy for people to follow orders. It lets you tell yourself. It doesn't ask you how people could miss the clues that what they were doing is an evil thing. It lets you miss the clues. The typewriter that the game is played with has a small SS symbol as the shift function on the 5 key. The broken glass that the game is played over is a reference to the Night of Broken Glass, Kristallnacht, I believe. It's It's incredible. And it's powerful, and it's emotional, and it sways opinion. At the end of Train, the game has made you think a different way. In Daniel Andrews Sucks, and honestly, it does Romero a disservice to compare the games in any way. Like, it's so unfair to her to have Train up against or put in contrast to Daniel Andrews Sucks. But I think it's important because I think it is the most expressive game at what I'm trying to display in Complicity. In Daniel Andrews Sucks, we never get that feeling. When we play Labour policies, we call them failures. When we're rewarded with Guy's policies, they're victory conditions. The game is telling us constantly, and with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer, what it wants us to believe. And so because the game never lets us figure it out on our own, it never generates its effect. Remember, the aim of this game is to sway your opinion on getting you to vote in a different way. Propaganda games kind of have a secret second name. So the first one is getting people who don't agree with the propaganda to agree with it. Right? The first one is getting people who are dismissive of the ideas inherent within the game to rather buy into it by using the mechanisms of the game. The second secret function of propaganda is to incite action within the supporter base. There's an old line I heard once, which is religions need zealots, armies need soldiers, and politics need both. This is about getting those supporters to become the zealot foot soldiers. So let's talk about the first. To sway people's opinion, you need clear messaging. And Daniel Andrews Sucks has no clear messaging. There's no connection between the Dandrews policy that is voted and the Liberal policy that wins. If I play, I made an example. Let me find it. Okay. If I play Labor's Red Shirt Rort, which is a corruption scandal that apparently several $1,000s, $50,000, something like that, was misspent by the Labor government. If I play that as the most damaging scandal in Victoria and everyone agrees and they vote for me, I may be rewarded by picking up a card that shows Liberals' free flu vaccine policy. And there's no connection between cause and effect. It's too disparate in my mind. Therefore, as a player, I don't connect Daniel Andrews did this bad thing with Matthew Guy will do this good thing. Attempting to sway an independent or swing voter requires a really clear connection, requires generating a cause and effect. If I play Labor denies onshore gas exploration, and therefore power prices are higher and everyone votes for me, my reward should be Liberal policy allows onshore gas exploration, power prices are lower, families are happier, birds chirp. Probably not, because of all the gas exploration and the climate change. We as voters have to understand both that there's a problem and that there's a solution, that the problem is Labor and the solution is Liberal. And that then generates action. The second aim, reinforcing the beliefs of fanatics and then giving them something to do. The kind of Liberal supporter that's going to play this game or going to even read this text proves two things. One, they're a Liberal supporter and they care. And two, they have some time on their hands. They have functional time that they're using for a political recreation activity. And yeah, the kind of person who plays this game probably doesn't exist. But if they did, imagine harnessing that intent. Daniel Andrews Sucks never generates action. It never comes close. In fact, this is really important to me. Take a look at the closest thing that happens to action in Daniel Andrews Sucks, which is the voting process. And the voting process is really weird because that's democracy, right? That's what we should be leveraging in this game. We should be saying, when you vote, you can change these policies and you can make the world better. But instead, we vote for Labor policies. Like, granted, we're voting for which one's most damaging, but there's still this cognitive dissonance between, I guess, there's like a ludonarrative dissonance between voting for Labor, generating a majority that is framed towards Labor action, and that then being a negative thing for Liberal votes. It's super weird. It's kind of in the vein of like Oscar Wilde is often quoted. I don't know if it's apocryphal or not, but Wilde's, the only thing worse than being talked about is not being talked about. This game is talking about Labor. 100% of the votes go towards the Labor policy. And I want to show you a way that this is done differently and effectively. This bit is called Lucky Lobsters. Now, Lucky Lobsters was a scratch ticket that was handed out by Labor. I don't know if people are going to understand the like lobster, the level of lobster shit that is coming out of this election. I don't even want to get close to explaining it. If you're interested in like Australian politics and lobsters, it's worth just looking at the mimetic bullshit that comes out of it. It's phenomenal. So Lucky Lobsters is a scratchy that comes out. The text says, match 3 symbols below, see what you get under the Liberals. You scratch it, and it says there's wage theft and school cuts and workers get killed and there's health cuts. And it's like, it's bad news, right? Bad news bears. Then it says, and like this text is the important thing, right? Try your luck this election. This game is about the idea that the Liberal Party is a gamble, right? That they're untested and can produce only bad things. This is the kind of thing that could only come from an incumbent government that can use the, things have been getting better the last 4 years. So, you don't want to take a gamble on the new party. And so what they do is, in order to spread that emotional engagement to people, they give them a gambling ticket and say, engage with this. It's still propaganda. It's still a shitty propaganda game. It's still designed to hijack your brain, but it's better at it. And this is sort of why Daniel Andrews Sucks is doomed to be as ineffective as it is. In playing it, we're so detached from the reality of the actual problems, of the emotional landscape it's trying to leverage. We don't play as school kids who are burdened by the Safe Schools program, or as terrified homeowners accosted by gangs of youths. We don't even play as like struggling battlers who are affected by tax dollars spent on corruption. Instead, we play as the politicians. Instead, we are above it all. We play policies. We literally treat people's lives as a card game. We're talking about the most damaging things a government can do, and we laugh about it. At the end, like, someone suggests that the worst thing a government could do is create a Safe Schools, an anti-bullying program, and they play it, and we all vote and agree, and they get their third card, and they throw their hands in the air, and they go, Daniel Andrews sucks! And it's a fucking joke to them. And 4 days later, 4.1 million people vote in an election that will decide the lives and the livelihoods of 6 million people at least. The two barely feel connected. And here's the thing. 4 days later, on the 25th or the 26th of November, the Liberal Party lost. And Daniel Andrews was re-elected. And DanielAndrews.sucks disappeared from the internet. Within 24 hours of the election being called, it redirected to the Liberal Party's website, and now it's a dead link. So why am I talking about it? This game's lifespan was tiny and its impact was probably even more so. I would doubt personally, like hand on my heart, I would doubt that a single voter was swayed into either changing their vote or talking to someone about changing their vote or any sort of action through this game, which kind of leads to this conflict that I had when I came home tonight. In analyzing Daniel Andrews Sucks, am I legitimizing it? In comparing the idea of good and bad propaganda, am I helping the wrong people? In placing Brenda Romero's Train against a game that is so devoid of heart, am I being unfair? The website doesn't exist. The game lives on only in people's Twitter posts and a junkie article. Isn't the right thing to do just to let it die the death it deserves? And I don't think it is. Or I wouldn't be doing this. I believe that we should talk about Daniel Andrews Sucks. I believe we should talk about it not because of what it is, but because of what it wanted to be. There are games being written right now with the support of governments, funded by politicians, believing that they're doing the right thing, that are designed to hack your brain and change the way you think using the mechanics of analog games. These games are being written by professional game designers, by professional PR people, on the payroll of government entities. And sure, I bet their heart is in the right place. I bet their intentions are good. They probably just want to, they probably see it as like informing people and educating them, right? But when we have games like Daniel Andrews Sucks, which is so terrible that everybody laughs at it and dismisses it, and then we have games like Lucky Lobsters, which are so effective at what they're trying to do that people laugh with it rather than calling it out for what it is, it worries me. I think we have to remember that games are always designed to inform us of what the designer wants us to think. Propaganda games always have those twin goals of both swaying our opinion and forcing our hand into action. Whether it's through the text or the mechanics or the fiction, they are designed to get us to think how people want us to think. These exist, and there are more in development right now. And I guess I'm not saying that games with a message are evil. I'm not saying that anything that wants to tell you an idea is propaganda. I'm not saying that we should stick to, like, I was going to say dungeon crawls, but even then they often are imbued with meaning. What I'm suggesting is that all media really, but especially games, because of how they force that complicity, are written to make you view the world through a certain lens. I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't engage with these ideas. What I am suggesting is that you should always consider, what lens is this being written through? Who is pointing this camera? And I think most importantly, what are they not letting me see? Daniel Andrews sucks, but it scares me.